Hello and welcome. A few days ago, I tried to install Pop! OS alongside Windows 10, so I'll have dual boot. I ran into a few problems, so I decided to make this video, in which I'm going to cover the entire process step by step. So there will be a dual boot installation guide specifically for Dell laptops, for my own future use, and for everyone interested. Let's start by making room on the disk for Pop! OS. I'll use the disk management tool for that. Just right click on the Windows icon and select Disk Management.
Here we can see all of the partitions on the disk.
As you can see, I already have free space at the end of the disk. And that's because I already had dual boot in the past. But to free up some space, just right click on the C partition and select Shrink Volume.
Here you can see how much free space you can free up. I recommend that you free up at least 25 gigabytes. But I am going to cancel as I already have free space.
Next thing will be downloading the Pop! OS ISO file, which you can do at pop.system76.com.
And let's select download. You can choose between the latest LTS version, which is the long-term support, or the latest version overall. If you have an NVIDIA graphics card, download the NVIDIA version. Otherwise, download the default version.
I already downloaded it, so I already have the ISO file. Next, we're going to download Rufus. Rufus is a tool that uses the ISO file to create a bootable USB flash drive. It can be downloaded from rufus.ie. Rufus doesn't require installation, it's a runnable file, so I'll just run it. We now need a USB flash drive, and we'll use it as the installation media. Notice that everything on it will be deleted, so make sure it doesn't contain anything important. Rufus immediately recognizes it.
Let's now select the Pop! OS ISO file. And let's start.
Okay, our installation media is ready. I leave the USB stick plugged in and I'll restart the computer.
We need to quickly tap the F12 key as soon as the Dell logo appears. Let's now open the BIOS setup. First, in System Configuration, under SATA Operation, we need to change the selection from RAID on to AHCI. Linux won't work with the RAID on option. Next, under Secure Boot, we need to make sure that the Secure Boot Enable box is not checked. Let's apply the settings and exit. Again, we need to quickly tap F12. And now let's select the USB flash drive from the list. My USB flash drive is SanDisk, so that's what I choose. And try or install Pop! OS. Select your language and your location. and your keyboard layout.
We now have two options. Clean install will delete everything from the disk, including Windows. We want dual boot, so we won't choose that. We're going to choose custom.
We now need to choose where on the disk Pop! OS will be installed. Since we freed up some space in Windows, we can use it now. As we can see down here, we must at least select a root partition, a boot partition that is at least 500 megabytes, and it is also recommended to select a swap partition. We will create the three of them on the free space. So we need to modify partitions. First, we need to make sure that the correct disk is displayed. And we can see the SSD and the USB flash drive. I want to add the partitions to the SSD, so that's what I'll choose. And let's select the unallocated space. Let's start by creating the boot partition. So let's create a new partition. We want it to start at the beginning of the free space, so the preceding free space needs to be 0. And the size needs to be at least 500 megabytes. We can give the partition a name, so it will be easier to recognize it later on. And the file system for the boot partition has to be FAT32. And let's add the new partition.
I now want to create a swap partition. Swap is disk space used by Linux whenever it's short of RAM. I'll go with 3 GB, which should be more than enough. The last partition will use the rest of the disk space, and that's where Linux will reside, along with all of the users' files. The file system for Linux partitions needs to be ext4. Okay, we specified the 3 new partitions. Let's apply the operation to actually create them.
And let's close gparted to get back to the installation. And we can see that the gray area was replaced by 3 new ones, one for each of the new partitions. The yellow partition is 500 megabytes.
That's what we allocated for the boot partition, so let's use it as a boot partition.
The red partition is about 3 gigabytes. So it's the swap partition, so let's use it as swap. The green partition is the big one, so let's use it for Linux itself as root. We see 3 check marks, so we're good to go. Let's erase and install. Great, it's done. Let's restart the computer. And let's quickly tap F12 when the logo appears.
We can remove the USB flash drive that we used as the installation media. The problem we currently have is that since we changed the SATA operation to AHCI, Windows will not load. The thing is that Windows can work with AHCI setting, but it needs additional drivers to do it. So what we're going to do is temporarily change it back to RAID on, load Windows and install these additional drivers, and then we will come back here and change it back to AHCI. So let's temporarily change it to RAID on.
Let's tap F12. And let's select Windows from the list.
We're not going to manually install any drivers. We will let Windows take care of it for us. All we have to do is load Windows in safe boot, while SATA is configured as AHCI. The first time Windows loads in safe boot and SATA is configured as AHCI, the drivers will be installed automatically. And then we won't need safe boot anymore. To enable safe boot, let's look for System Configuration. And in the Boot tab, I'm going to choose Safe Boot.
And let's restart. Again, let's tap on F12.
And now we're going to change SATA back to AHCI and leave it this way.
F12 again. And let's load Windows again.
And now, since Windows is in safe boot and SATA is configured to AHCI, the needed drivers were installed. So we can turn off safe boot. And when we load Windows now, it will work just fine, even though we are in AHCI. We can also take a look at the device manager. And we now have SATA AHCI controller installed. Okay, let's restart and log into Pop OS. Pop OS is the default option, so we don't have to use F12.
We need to create a user and give it a password.
And Pop OS is up and running, ready for use. Whenever we want to use Windows, when the computer starts, we'll use the boot menu with F12 and choose Windows from the list. And whenever we want to use Pop OS, we'll just turn on the computer, press nothing, and it will load. You might find out that whenever you log into Windows, the time is wrong. Luckily, it's really easy to fix, and I found a solution in the System76 support site. I leave a link in the video description below.
And at the very end of the page, we have a section about fixing the system clock. And I'll just copy it and paste it to my terminal.
After running it, you may have to fix the time zone in Windows, but once you do it, Windows will display the time correctly. One last question you might have is, can we change the default operating system? Because right now, Pop OS loads by default, and whenever we want to use Windows, we have to use F12 for the boot menu. So we can change it to be the other way around. Windows will load by default, and we'll only have to use the boot menu when we want to start Pop! OS. To do that, let's open the BIOS settings again.
And in the boot sequence, we're going to change the order so Windows will be in the top of the list.
And now, when the computer starts, it will always load Windows, unless we tap on F12 and deliberately choose Pop! OS. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.